Hi, I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground. Welcome to this week's episode of The Underground, a program that explores the testimony of the biblical prophets, the gospel of Jesus Christ, current events, and how all of these things relate to you and me. Now listen, friends, it is, from last week, it is a new world. It is a new world. From the time that I recorded last week's program at the beginning of the show, I said, I think I know who's going to be elected president. And I didn't say who, but in my heart, I really believed that it was probably going to be Hillary. Why did I believe that? Because I lived through the 90s. I, throughout the 90s, was incredibly politically engaged. And I watched in case after case after case where both Bill and Hillary would be caught red-handed committing acts that were either illegal or completely unethical. And despite all of the evidences, despite sitting in front of jurors and special panels, would say, I don't recall 60 or 200 some odd times that every time they managed to slither out of it, that they were just, Teflon, that nothing stuck to them. And I was simply, because of the pattern of having dealt with them in the past, because of my cynicism over the past 8 years as I've watched the mainstream media really largely just completely demagogue and demonize conservatives and so on and so forth, I didn't believe that the process was going to work. I didn't believe that there was a chance that we would see Hillary lose, that she would be a thing of the past, that the era of the Clintons would be a thing of the past. Now listen, I want to be very clear. I believe this is a good thing for the United States, for every American. The fact that this woman, with such a long history of corruption, of utterly being in the back pocket of some of the most corrupt terrorist-supporting states in the world, of being a criminal, of having a history of violating the law, but again, of slithering out of it, of crossing just so many ethical and legal lines, and yet managing to get away, but having lost the election. This is a good thing. I voted for Donald Trump. Now, I want to be very clear. I agonized throughout the whole election process. I'm not going to get into all of the details of that. Now is our job to speak to the Trump administration, to pray for the Trump administration, and to hold them to a more righteous and moral standard. So the topic for this week's episode is the Trump administration in Turkey. I thought it was the perfect title for this week's episode because this is Thanksgiving week. And people go, yeah, Turkey, I get it, Joel. I'll just tell you this interesting little blurb. Where did the American turkey, the bird, get its name? Well, when you had the British Empire, and you had all these Brits that were in Asia Minor, that were in Turkey in the Ottoman Empire, they used to hunt these type of hens, these guinea hen type of birds, guinea fowl, a little bit different than the African guinea fowl, sort of like a pheasant. And they didn't really have a name for them. Interestingly enough, in Turkey, they used to call them Hindis because they also had them in India from Hindustan or India. Well, then when you had many of these Brits come over to the United States, they see this bird and they didn't know what to call it. And the closest thing that they could liken it to were these hens from Turkey, and so which was the Ottoman Empire, but the land of the Turks, and so they called it the turkey. And so there is the etymology of the bird, the turkey. It actually comes from the Republic of Turkey. Okay, interesting. Good. The new administration, the Trump administration in Turkey. Something has developed even just over this past week as the Trump administration is putting together its cabinet, and there's something that we need to talk about. So here is an article that was featured in the online website called The Intercept, the online news site called The Intercept. And as you can see, the title of this article is Turkish Client Paid Trump Advisor Michael Flynn, General Michael Flynn's company, tens of thousands of dollars for lobbying. Okay, so one of the guys that has been welcomed on as part of the Trump transition team is General Michael Flynn. General Michael Flynn. Now, again, just a little bit of backstory. Trump has repeatedly made it clear that he is going to drain the swamp. What does that mean? He is going to get rid of much of the corruption in Washington. And when he says drain the swamp, what he's talking about foremost is the atmosphere of lobbying, the lobbyists in Washington, where everybody is being paid by some foreign government, by some corporation, by some company to go to the politicians to try to influence them. And so you have so many of these politicians that were former politicians, they retire and they get paid big, big bucks by these various foreign governments, corporations, and so forth to basically, spread the agenda of whatever these particular governments are and so forth. So the only way to really clean up Washington, one of the primary ways to clean up Washington, is to get rid of the lobbyists. Now, listen, this is a great thing. The fact that a president is talking this way, this is a miracle. And so this is a wonderful thing. Now, Trump made an ethics pledge, which would specifically prohibit registered lobbyists. So lobbyists have to actually register with Congress. Just like anything, a 501c3, you have to register with the government. If you want to actually be a lobbyist, so that it's very clear what you are, you have to register. So he said that he would prohibit lobbyists from working for his transition team or for his administration. This is one of the biggest problems with Hillary, is the merging between the Clinton Foundation and her position of government as Secretary of State and all of the jobs and so forth that flowed between one and all the payments and money. I mean, just completely corrupt. And a charity which, by the way, only spent 5% of all the multiple millions of dollars that they received on actual charities. 5%. That is a scam. That is an absolute scam. That is an ethical nightmare. The fact that anybody would stand up and defend that is a joke. Okay, so Trump has said he's going to get rid of these lobbyists. He said no lobbyists are going to work as part of his transition team or his administration. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who was one of Trump's earliest supporters, one of his earliest vocal supporters. He is now a vice chair of the transition team, and they're talking about him potentially getting the post of National Security Advisor. National Security Advisor. Okay, why is this a problem? Why is this a problem? Although Flynn, General Flynn himself is not a lobbyist, he owns a company. And again, this is the type of stuff that's common in Washington, and this is the kind of stuff that needs to stop in Washington. So Flynn has a company. It's called Flynn Intel Group. They specialize in intelligence reports and this sort of thing. It is a lobbying organization. It is registered with Congress as a lobbying organization. He has people on his staff who are registered lobbyists. Okay, so here is a guy he himself is not a lobbyist, but he owns a company, the primary purpose of which is to lobby politicians in Washington. But in order to do that, they have to get paid from outside sources, outside governments, outside corporations. Those that want influence in Washington will pay these lobbying groups to try to spread and influence their agenda. Okay, very simple. So a Flynn Intel Group client, one of his clients, this guy is named Kamil Akim Alptekin. He's a Turkish businessman. He paid Flynn's company tens of thousands of dollars on behalf of Turkey, on behalf of Turkish interests. Okay, so you go, all right, that's interesting. What did it produce? Well, on election day, on the day of the elections, Flynn published a fairly lengthy opinion piece and a very strong opinion piece in the online news website called The Hill. This is a real prominent website in Washington, The Hill. And specifically, he was urging the U.S. to support Turkey Turkey's controversial president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Those that watched last week's program, those that follow my program know that I am no fan of President Erdogan. That in my opinion, this guy he is a dictator, period. But he is sort of, I'm likening him to an emerging Adolf Hitler. There are so many parallels to his career, his actions, his behavior, his attitude, and the things that he's been doing over the past even just few months. If you're unaware of what I'm talking about, please go back and watch the last program. This guy is dangerous. So he writes this glowing piece on behalf of Erdogan, but specifically he was saying that the next administration should extradite this particular Turkish Islamist who lives in Pennsylvania, Fethullah Gülen. I don't have a problem with what he's saying in terms of extraditing Gülen. I really don't, because I could care less. He is an Islamist. He's a fraud. He shouldn't be hiding out in the United States, but he is not an Islamist after ISIS. Okay, we'll get into that some more. So here is the just a snapshot of the article in The Hill that Flynn wrote. And the title was, "Our ally Turkey is in crisis and needs our support." Our ally Turkey is in crisis and they need our support. In other words, Erdogan, who runs the country now, needs our support. Well, let's just see some of the things that Flynn had to say. He said this. He said, "We must begin with understanding that Turkey is vital to U.S. interests." Okay, now that may be the case with regard to foreign policy, and I would agree. Turkey is an important geostrategic piece of property. We have to carefully steward and manage our relationship with Turkey. Then he goes on, he says, "Turkey is really our strongest ally against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria." Well, it depends what you mean by strongest, because our best ally against ISIS has been the Kurds, whether in Syria, whether in Iraq, or anywhere. The Kurds have been the greatest ally, the strongest ally. They've been doing the most. They've got girls out there, young women fighting ISIS, doing the job, getting the job done, and we've done a little bit to support them. Turkey, on the other hand, has, again, I've talked about this extensively, Turkey was the primary entity that allowed ISIS to come into being. And listen, there was a lot of corruption in the American government that allowed ISIS to take place. But the bottom line is that Erdogan, the president of Turkey, he knew that tens of thousands of these kids were rolling into Syria across Turkish borders. They would fly into Istanbul. Many of them were being recruited. There are actual ISIS recruiting stations in Istanbul. They were then flying to Antakya or Antioch, right on the border of Syria and Turkey and Syria, and rolling in, and they would arrest 2 or 3 out of tens of thousands. Turkey, the government was giving them weapons, logistical support. These ISIS soldiers were coming back into Turkey to get medical treatment. There were porous borders for a long time. Well, yes, then ISIS began to turn on them. But really, over the past few years, every time Turkey says they're going to go invade and take out ISIS, they end up attacking the Kurds. So first of all, this very statement that Turkey is our strongest ally in the fight against ISIS is a lie. ISIS has been, for the past 3 years, has been Turkey's junkyard dog. It has been Turkey's proxy in its regional conflict against the Kurds, against Bashar Assad, and against the Iranians. The Iranians are using the Iraqi government, they're using Bashar Assad, they're using Hezbollah in Lebanon, they're using others as their proxy, their proxies down in Yemen, the Houthi rebels, right? So Iran uses proxies, Turkey used ISIS. And apart from ISIS, Turkey is also supporting, in the same way that the United States is, these so-called Syrian rebels. In other words, the groups that are incredibly porous of rolling between the rebels and Jabhat al-Nusra, which is also considered al-Qaeda, is very similar to ISIS in Syria. And so listen, the American government is compromised. And why? Because we're putting our primary emphasis in our war against Iran. I understand that the Middle East is complicated. I understand that it's very difficult. But to call Turkey an ally in the fight against ISIS is a lie. And it's coming from a man who's being paid tens of thousands of dollars by a wealthy Turkish businessman to lobby Washington on behalf of Turkish interests. Okay, Christians, pay attention. There are more journalists in prison in Turkey the past few years than North Korea, than China, than Iran. This is not a free democratic nation that we want to say this is a great ally. Is it important for us to maintain ties because of military bases, all of these things? Yes, we have to be wise as serpents. But to write an article saying stuff like this is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. For this week's episode, we are offering The Antichrist, Turkey, and the Coming Caliphate DVD. This 5-session teaching DVD features my newest teaching covering all of the latest events unfolding in the nation of Turkey, the history and theology which explains why Turkey is so critical within biblical prophecy, and what to watch for next. This newest teaching DVD is only $25. Or, for a bundle discount, you can get a signed copy of my book, Mideast Beast, The Scriptural Case for an Islamic Antichrist, along with The Antichrist, Turkey, and the Coming Caliphate DVD, as well as the Antichrist Debate DVD, featuring a historical debate between Dr. Thomas Ice of the Pre-Tribulational Research Institute and myself, nearly 3 hours long. That's the Mideast Beast book, the Antichrist, Turkey, and the Coming Caliphate DVD, and the debate between Dr. Tommy Ice and myself for only $50. To order any of these special offers, go to joelstrumpet.com and click on the store. When you order any of these products, you help support this ministry. Flynn goes on. He says, to professionals in the intelligence community, the stamp of terror is all over. He calls Fethullah Gulen, he calls him Mullah Gulen. Mullah Gulen's statements in the tradition of, he's referring to Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna. These are the ideological fathers of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. So he's likening Gulen to Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb. Now listen, these are two very different Islamists. Is Gulen an Islamist? Yes. Is he like Al-Qaeda? Is he like the Brotherhood? No. Why? Because the Brotherhood, or Al-Qaeda, or ISIS, they will brazenly use jihad, murder, and terrorism to carry out their goals. That is not who Gulen is. Gulen is an Islamist in that he wants to see a Turkish Islamist nationalistic sort of maybe a revival of a caliphate. He wants to see Islamic government. He wants to see Islam triumph. But the model that he uses is very different than ISIS. And to compare them two as if they are one and the same is ignorant. And again, please forgive me. I don't mean to be arrogant in criticizing an American general, but this is nonsense. Anybody that understands these different characters knows that there is a drastic difference between Osama bin Laden and Fethullah Gulen. Are they both Islamists in that they want to establish a caliphate Sharia law? Yes, but their vision of that caliphate is very, very different. Okay. He goes on, he says, Gulen's vast global network has all the right markings to fit the description of a dangerous sleeper terror network. Nonsense. Nonsense. Well, let me put it this way. Again, they are a sleeper underground organization trying to infiltrate and spread their agenda, but it's not primarily through terror. You can't find an example of the Gulen network using terror. Yes, they're trying to spread their ideological agenda, but not through terrorism, not through terror. Okay. And then he goes on, he says, from Turkey's point of view, Washington is harboring Turkey's Osama bin Laden. That may be the case from Turkey's perspective, but their perception does not make it true. Okay. The point is this, is that when the failed coup took place in Turkey, most are saying that it was Gulen and his people that did that. Okay, that may be the case. We don't know. It may have been something that Erdogan's government created as a means to purge all of his opponents throughout the government, because that's exactly what he's done. He's jailed and put away over 100,000 people. He's removed them, fired them, jailed them. Many of them are disappearing. We're talking people that are clearly not terrorists, people that are, again, Salahuddin Demirtas, who is a very well-respected Kurdish politician, has been arrested and put in prison, and he's called a terrorist. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. This would be like if Donald Trump came into power and immediately took people like Nancy Pelosi and arrested them and said, she's a terrorist. She's trying to carry out terrorist acts. She might be an opponent, but she's not a terrorist. This is the kind of thing that's exploding. I'm talking college professors, policemen, judges, kids in school. They're being put in prison. Okay. Flynn goes on. He says, Washington's silence on this explosive topic speaks volumes when we hear the incredulous claim that the democratically elected president of Turkey staged a military coup. Listen, this guy is a dictator. This guy is a dictator. Don't treat him like he's democratically elected. He managed to weasel his way into power, and he has used all sorts of fake coups and conspiracy theories. There was Ergenekon. And these different things that he used to remove all of the military from power, claiming that they were about to engage in this big coup. And it was a complete fraud. He goes on. He says that they bombed their own parliament. They undermined the confidence in Turkey's strong economy just so that he could purge his political opponents. Flynn goes on. He says, this baseless claim is a dark reminder of the vicious rumors spread by our enemies that 9/11 was an inside job. So now he's trying to liken the idea that Erdogan maybe was behind the coup himself. He's comparing that to the truther movement. Listen, friends, there's a lot of legitimate evidence. And this is the type of person. I mean, look, we've got tapes of Erdogan talking to his son saying, get rid of the money, boxes of money. And, Erdogan came out and said, oh, that's manipulated. That's not really my voice. You can hear him say it. This guy is corrupt to the core. He is a dictator. And now he is emerging in a very Hitler-esque way. And you have this guy who could potentially be Trump's foreign policy advisor, who is making statements which, honestly, if I didn't know who he was, I would say, what in the world is going on? I would assume that he was a pawn of the left. But again, he is being paid by Turkish lobby groups. He goes on, he says, we need to adjust our foreign policy to recognize Turkey as a priority. Again, we can talk foreign policy. We can talk about all those things, but the bottom line is we need to be realistic. And he says all these claims are incredulous. Many of the claims that he's making are baseless, ridiculous, ignorant, and incredulous. He says the forces of radical Islam derive their ideology from radical clerics like Gulen, who is running a scam. I agree. Gulen is a scam artist. He's trying to pretend to be this peaceful, moderate, tolerant guy, and he has an agenda. Yes, he does, but he is not a terrorist. It is imperative that we remember, now get this, who our real friends are. Who's he talking about? He's talking about Erdogan. This is a guy who is he's on Trump's transition team, and he could have a prominent position in Trump's government, saying that Erdogan, this guy is our real friend. Okay, so here is a picture of Fethullah Gulen, again, the Islamist that has been living in rural Pennsylvania since the 90s under the Clinton administration, where he has been hiding from prosecution from back then it was more of a secular Turkish government. Is he an Islamist? Absolutely. Here's a quote to show that he is running a scam, that he is not what he appears to be. And Flynn references this statement. This is from Fethullah Gulen. He says, you must move into the arteries of the system without anyone noticing your existence until you reach all the power centers. You must wait until such time as you have gotten all the state power, until you have brought to your side all the constitutional institutions in Turkey. So listen, was this guy an undercover stealth Islamist? Absolutely. Do I care if we extradite him? No, I don't. It wouldn't bother me. Although we've made agreements that we're going to protect him and that sort of thing, I don't have any loyalties to that. The question is, should we cave into the dictator that Flynn refers to as our real friend in Turkey? Now listen, okay, this statement betrays the truth concerning who Gulen is, but what about Erdogan? What about Erdogan? Here's a couple quotes from Erdogan, and these are quotes that Flynn conveniently doesn't reference. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, he says, democracy is like a streetcar. When you come to your stop, you get off. Listen, with the failed Turkish coup, the streetcar came to its stop and Erdogan got off. He suspended the constitution. He has been arresting the whole country. This guy is not a liberal. Turkey is no longer a liberal democracy. It is a dictatorship. He has done exactly, basically, what Putin has done in terms of ensconcing himself in power for the foreseeable future, at least until 2023, or probably far more, actually, 2029. But even more so, I would argue that he's even closer to an emerging Adolf Hitler. And again, I don't make those statements lightly. Here's another quote that Flynn does not mention, again by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, our real friend. He said, "The mosques are our barracks. The domes are helmets. The minarets are bayonets. And the faithful are soldiers." So he's referring to the Muslims as his soldiers, that the mosques are the military barracks. Erdogan is an Islamist. Gulen is an Islamist. So is an Erdogan. So why the double standard? Why the hypocrisy? And I don't believe it's just pure ignorance. Is it because of the lobby? I mean, I don't know. Is it because he's lying because he wants to lie to and deceive and coddle Erdogan? Perhaps that's the case. But the bottom line is the things that he wrote in his article are nonsense. Nonsense. Listen, what are some other reasons to be concerned about Erdogan? Well, again, I mentioned this last week. Here's a map of Turkey. Here's a map of present-day Turkey. You can see the borders. Here's a map that Erdogan has been appealing to the past few weeks as he's become incredibly arrogant and boisterous with the president of Iraq, saying, we're going to come in, we're going to get involved militarily in your country, whether you like it or not. Here's the map that Erdogan has been putting out. Okay, if you look at this map, it includes the Balkans, it includes large sections of Bulgaria, of Greece, all of Cyprus, large sections of Syria and Iraq, as well as Armenia. Listen, is it crazy to refer to Erdogan as having Hitler-esque characteristics when he's talking about expanding his nation into referring to other nations as if it's his territory? And using this sort of neo-Ottoman rhetoric? Listen, this expansionist, imperialist arrogance, this is dangerous. This is profoundly dangerous. And if our top governmental leaders don't recognize it, then what in the world is going on? The church has to speak up. Now, let me say this. Flynn referred to Gulen as Turkey's Osama bin Laden because to him, he's this terrorist. A far more accurate reference would be, no. Gulen is the guy that Erdogan rode to the top. He rode on the success of Gulen. Yes, indeed, Gulen infiltrated the Turkish government. And that is exactly how Erdogan rode to the top. And then when he got to the top, he turned on the Gulenists. This is exactly what Hitler did. This is exactly what Hitler did when he turned on the brown shirts, when he turned on the SA. These were the people that he used to get to power. Once he got to the top, he was afraid they had too much power. He turned on them and he killed them. And Ernst Röhm was one of his good friends, one of his supporters, and Hitler turned on him and killed them. And that's exactly what Gulen is a much more comparable analogy. Not to Osama bin Laden, but to Rome. And he's the one that Erdogan is turning on. Now, finally, I want to just reference a tweet that General Flynn sent out back in February of this year. And what he did is he was retweeting a video that was made from YouTube. And this is what Flynn said. He said, "Fear of Muslims is rational. Please forward this to others. The truth fears no questions." So he puts up this video, which essentially, now listen, I want to be clear. Does Islam represent a threat? Islam, yes. Are all Muslims terrorists? No. Listen, I am the author of Islamic Antichrist. If I'm telling you that you're a fearmonger and that you're taking things way too far, if that you're expressing ignorant statements regarding Muslims, then you probably should pay attention. I am aware of the dangers of Islam, but this type of stuff, this is the stuff, I mean, this is shameful that American general would be retweeting this type of fear-mongering. I'll just play just a very brief clip from the video just to give you a feel.
And please keep in mind that the term Islamophobia is an oxymoron, since having a phobia means having an irrational fear. Fearing Islam, which wants 80% of humanity enslaved or exterminated, is totally rational, and hence cannot possibly be called a phobia.
That all Muslims want to see 80% of the globe enslaved. This sort of thing, that fear of Islam is rational, that we should be afraid of Islam, that all Muslims want to kill everyone, that all of the terrorists throughout the earth are all Muslims and this sort of thing. And the bottom line is, that's not true. There's all sorts of terrorists. Yeah, many Muslims, yes. But the bottom line is, listen, as the church, our job is to be wise as serpents, but gentle as doves. And above all, while being aware of the threats around us, if we lose our love, if we lose our light, if we lose our salt, we are done. This type of thing is shameful and needs to be exposed. Let me just end it by saying this. General Flynn needs to be fired. The church, conservative or not, needs to get behind what I'm saying. General Flynn has no business being an advisor to President Trump. I believe that Vice President Pence, who has a fairly good working understanding of the Middle East, I believe that he would agree with me that going forward in the days ahead, as the United States deals with radical Islam, we need a wise approach. We need a godly approach. We need an informed approach. And as much as it pains me to say, General Flynn doesn't represent any of these things, and he needs to be fired. So listen, I know this is fairly controversial, but this is where I stand. So I want to thank you all for being with us this week. As always, I look forward to seeing you next week. I'm Joel Richardson. This is The Underground.